number of rows, how much rows we have entered into the table, that is called as relational instant. When we are designing the application or when we are using the application, that time there is some constraint or set of rules to be followed. Those type of constraint are called application constraint or semantic constraint. How we are identifying or how we are fetching the records? By using primary key. If the primary key value is only null, how we can fetch the data? Hello everyone, welcome to one more session of database management system. Myself Indu J, faculty in the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. Today we are going to discuss a second unit in your syllabus, that is relational model. So database management unit 2 session 1, what we are discussing? We are discussing the relational data model and relational constraint. Let's see what we have in the relational model. Relation model represent the database as a collection of relations. So far we have discussed a collection of entities. Now we are saying the collection of relations. A relation is nothing but the table or the of value. Relation is what? We are representing every relation in the form of tables with the value. Every row in the table represent the collection of related values. If we say it's a table, we should have the combination of rows and then the column, right? Every row gives you what? The value related to the particular entity. These rows in the table denoted the real word entity. The table name and the column name are helpful in interprets the meaning and the value of each row. The data are represented as a set of relation in the relational model. Data, how we are representing? We are representing the data in the form of set of relation. However, the physical storage of data is independent of each other, but when we are representing in the relational model, we show it's dependent on each other. Next, what we have is table. As I told you, relations are represented in the form of table. Every table has a rows and column, and table has a rows and column. Rows are called as tuple. Rows are called as what? Tuple, and columns are called as attribute. Rows are called tuple, columns called as attribute. This format of storing the relation among the entity. Table is a format of storing the relation among entities. Next, what is tuple? Tuple is a single row of the table which contain a single record for relation is called as tuple. Relation instant. What is relational instant? A finite set of tuple in the relational database system represent the relational instant. Number of rows. How much rows we have entered into the table, that is called as relational instant. The relational schema. A relational schema describes the relation name, that is a table name, attributes and their name. Attributes and their name. What all the attributes? Properties. Properties with the name will be described by the relational schema. What is relational schema? Relation schema provides name for the table and name for the attributes that is present in that table. Next, what we have is relation key. Each row has one or more attribute known as relation key. Attribute, all of we have already know what is key. Key is a unique value. Each attribute has one or more attribute known as a relation key, which can identify the row in the relationship uniquely. Which can identify the complete row or the complete record uniquely. Degree, the total number of attribute which in the relation is called as a degree of the relation. How many number of attributes we have in that particular table, that is called as degree of the relation. And cardinality, total number of rows present in the table that is called as cardinality. Number of rows, how many values we have inserted into the table, that is called as cardinality of the relationship. Attribute domain, each attribute some predefined values and the scope, that is called as domain of an attribute, or we call it as attribute domain, that specify which data has to be stored in which format, which data type has to be used to store the particular attribute, that is called as domain of an attribute. Relationship model constraint, what all the constraint or the set of rules we have to form the table or to form the relationship is called relationship model constraint. Okay, every relation has some conditions that must hold for it, that is a valid relationship. To say any relationship is a valid, they should follow some set of rules, some set of condition, that is called as relationship constraints. Here we categorize the relationship constraint into mainly three categories, that is we have three main categories. One is implicit constraint, when some restrictions is put on the data model, when some restrictions are put on the data model, those type of restrictions are called as implicit constraint. Okay, when some constraints put on the schema, that is called as schema constraint or the explicit constraint. The constraints that are directly applied on the schema of the data model by specifying them in the data definition language is called as schema based constraint or explicit constraint. Okay, three categories. One is implicit, which the constraint applied on the data model. Second one is explicit, the constraint applied on the schema. Third one is application based constraint. The constraint is neither applied on the database or not applied on the schema, but the constraint is applied on the application level. When we are designing the application or when we are using the application, that time there is some constraint or set of rules to be followed. Those type of constraint are called application constraint or semantic constraint. Okay, clear with three categories of constraint. Here we are basically dealing with the schemas, so we consider most of the time explicit constraints. Let's see about explicit constraint. The explicit constraint again categorized, or we have different type of explicit constraint, that is domain constraint, key constraint, entity integrity constraint and referential integrity constraint. What do you mean by integrity constraint? Integrity constraint are the set of rules that is used to maintain the quality of the information. Why we are giving constraint? To maintain the quality of the data. Okay, integrity constraints ensure that the data insertion, updating and other process have to be performed in such a way that data integrity should not affect. Means there should not be any changes on the base of the data or the physical data when we do any insertion, updation or modification. So to maintain that, we have to have some set of rules, that is called as integrity constraints. Thus, integrity constraint is used to guard the data against the accident and then the damage. So, first constraint what we have is, in the different types of constraint, is domain constraint. What do you mean by domain constraint? Domain constraint can be defined as a definition of a valid set of values for an attribute. Here, domain constraints include whether that attribute is specifying which domain it belongs to, whether it is a string, whether it is a character, whether it is a number, integer, float, that all has to be specified before using the data, before inserting the values into the table. So that is called as domain constraint. Means attribute belongs to which data type, that has to be specified. That comes with the domain constraint. Database by the multiple users for performing the different operation, and in that case the concurrent execution of the data can be performed. A single database can be used by different users. That is called as concurrent execution. While we are doing the concurrent execution, we have to maintain the integrity of the database. So we are putting some restrictions on domain of the database. Okay, next what we have is key constraint. Key constraints are a uniqueness constraint, since it ensures that every tuple in the relation should be unique. Every tuple means what? Rows in the table. So every row should be different from one another. So that who is going to ensure? The key constraint or the uniqueness constraint is going to ensure. How we are doing that? By using the primary key. Okay, key are the entity set that is used to identify the entity within the entity set uniquely. An entity set can have a multiple keys, but out of which one key will be the primary key. So only one primary key we can have. We cannot have more than one primary key, though the keys are unique. Primary can contain a unique and null value in the relational table. What is the constraint we are posing here? Primary key should have a unique value and it can be a null value. Okay, next what we have example here. We can see in the example what is the attributes or rows we have, that is ID, name, semester and then the age. How many columns we have? 4 columns. How many rows we have? We have 5 rows. So this is called what? Tuple, or this complete thing is called as one record. Okay, this complete thing is called as one record. As a key constraint states that this is a primary key. This is a primary key. Primary key should be unique. Here you can say 1000, 1001, 1002, 1003. These are all unique or different from each other. When it comes to 1002, we are repeating the same thing. So this not be allowed. That is a restriction what we have when we are defining the primary key. Not allowed because row must have a unique value. Value should not repeat here. Okay. Next type of constraint what we have is entity integrity constraint. What is entity integrity constraint? Entity integrity constraint says that no primary key can have a null value. In key constraint, we are saying that primary key can have a null value, but it should be unique. In integrity constraint, what we are saying, primary key should be unique and it should not have a null value. Okay, since using the primary key, we identify the each tuple uniquely in the relationship. The entity integrity constraints state that the primary key value cannot be null. Primary key value cannot be null. This is because if the primary key has a null value, then we cannot identify those rows. How we are identifying or how we are fetching the records? By using primary key. If the primary key value is only null, how we can fetch the data or how we can fetch the record? Is not possible. So it should not be null. Here null means it is not either 0 or nothing. It's an empty value. It can be infinity, it can be 0, it can be anything. But null is we consider as empty value, no value. Okay. The table can contain null value other than the primary key. In the particular table, it can contain null value anywhere else except in the primary key column. Okay, see the example here. Here, employee ID is a primary key, right? All others are different, just a key, a simple key. Okay, here 1, 2, 3 primary, which is distinct from 142, which is distinct from 164. Here we have an employee called Devil, who is fetching the salary 27,000 rupees. But if I want to access the record of this particular employee Devil, how we are accessing? I am accessing using the primary key, which is not present here. So I cannot access the detail of the employee table without a primary key. That is a constraint what we have in the entity integrity constraint. The primary key value should not be null. Next, what we have is referential integrity constraint. Referential integrity constraint specified between two relations or the two tables to maintain the consistency among the tuple in two relationship. So, whatever we are using, the same value, the key value should be used in the other value. How we are providing the connection? To provide connection, we should have some common element between the two tables. How we are providing that common element? By using the key references. So, this is also called as foreign key. Foreign key of the relation R1 have the same domain as the primary key of the relation R2. I'll explain you with this in an example. Here you can say, you can see we have an employee name, employee number, this is employee ID, employee name, age and department. So this is one table. Consider that is employee table 1. And here we should have one more table called department table. Department 1. What all we are having here? We are having employee ID, department ID and department name. Right. So here what is employee ID have? Have 4 employee IDs, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So employee is working in IT department, 2 is working in HR department, 3 is working in IT department and 4 is working in marketing department. Okay. Now let's give the name as information technology, human resource and marketing. Fine. Here whatever the employee ID is there, those employee ID should be present here in the department table to provide the connection between employee table and then the department table. If in place of 4, if I put it as 5, it will show you an integrity constraint error, because which is not defined in the table 1, you are trying to define in the table 2. So that is what is referential constraint. You are referring the primary key of the table 1 to the table 2 to fetch the detail of that particular employee. So here in the table 2, in the D1 table, employee ID is considered as foreign key. Okay. Employee ID is considered as foreign key referred from where? Employee table E1. Okay. So understood what is a referential constraint. What we have defined the primary key, the same primary key should be present in the second table also. That is a referential integrity constraint. Then what we have is relational model constraint. The same example they have explained. In the department number is equal to 22 is a foreign key of the first table is not allowed, since the department 22 is not at all defined in the first table. Then what we have is relational database schema. What is relational database schema? Schema is represented using S. S is a set of relational schema where we have different relation R1, R2, R3, so on up to Rm. Different relation together putting into one form is called as relational schema S. And the set of integrity constraint, a relational database of S is a set of relational states also. Okay, see, this is a database. If it is a database, we should have a relation in the database, that is R1, R2 and up to Rm, such that each Ri is a state of Ri. Each relational set is a state in the relational schema. Ri relational state satisfying the integrity constraint specified in the integrity constraint. How we have to develop the schema such that it has to satisfy all the integrity constraint. What all the integrity constraint we have discussed? That is domain constraint, key constraint, entity integrity constraint and referential integrity constraint. That all has to be satisfied to form a particular relational schema. That's all about relational model. Thank you.